The MiTE Chronicles, Day 6. I awoke from a dream I dreamt of gravel, and immediately stepped in a pile of sheep poop. Now, I don't consider myself a man prone to fits of rage, but these were vintage unscuffed 94 Air Jordans worth over $600, and someone had to pay. If not the $600, and as I beat him to death he assured me he hadn't the cash, then I'd amicably settle the debt for a nice flank of thigh and a few chunks of woolen skin. Now, I don't consider myself a man prone to violent outbursts of murderous intent, but when a cousin of his caught sight of my debt collection efforts and yelled, "Hey!" well, I decided it best to have a stern talk with the only witness to my first-degree faux pas to assure my continued freedom from an untimely and ultimately fruitless prosecution. I mean, there was no bringing him back, after all. I ruined 2 lives. Or, I guess, 3 now. But then a cow approached me and said, "I know what you done, man. Moo." To which I understandably had no reasonable recourse but to squeeze his nethers with so much force that something white came out until he promised not to talk. Now, I don't consider myself a man prone to acts of malfeasant homicidal contempt, but, oh, hell, I was on a roll. Kill 'em all, God will know his own. When it was all over, I held 3 blocks of slightly blood-spattered wool in my hands and resolved to never eat strangely colored mushrooms I find growing on cow patties again. Now that my trip had mellowed, man, it occurred to me that I'd never had a good look at the chasm I found at the edge of the forest line. Perhaps it contained some reachable gravel. On second inspection, indeed, I found multiple gravel stores just a few blocks below the chasm's lip. I resolved to return on the morrow and claim it, but the sun was quickly setting, and it was going to take me the better portion of the night to scrub the poop and blood smears from my vintage Jordans. I was so close now to having a bed to call my own. Just a single block of wood between me and my first good night's rest. A single block of wood, some sugar, and a wedge of cheese, to be precise. Oh God, the cheese. Yep, no, don't mind me. You just take your time there, cheese. I've got all night. Since I couldn't craft a bed, I decided to split my last 2 blocks of wood for sticks to be used in the handle of the axe I'd make when I finally had the 12 flint chips needed. And I soon found good use for those sticks as the sun rose and my erstwhile home security guard Samuel came knocking, asking pointed questions about some sheep gone missing from his crew. Our discourse was heated but civil, and we came to a mutual understanding that if he didn't want to share in their fate, he'd best get off my doorstep and never darken it again. You hear me, Samuel? There's more where that came from. I descended into the chasm carefully and made my way to the nearest outcropping of gravel. I only had a few more digs left on my last wooden shovel, and I put them to good use before it broke. I dug into the narrow sliver of stone as far as my fingers would reach, and then backfilled the hole with dirt until I'd collected as much gravel as I could. I then crossed to the other side of the chasm, making a stairwell of dirt to the last exposed gravel above this narrow precipice. I collected my 10th flint chip right there, and exited the chasm with just enough daylight to make sure that cow remembered to keep his mouth shut about the dead the fluffies of which we do not speak. I locked myself inside for the evening, and while I was waiting for another wedge of brie to curdle, I heard sirens outside. I'm ashamed to say that my first thought was, "Cheese it, it's the cops." I could hear Samuel outside directing the officer to my door and swore to take each of his little legs off one by one when this was all over. But for now, I clearly had to defend myself from this unjust and warrantless assault on my property and personage. The officer attempted to tase me, and I thought he had a gun. Yes, I thought he had a gun. I feared for my life. He was coming right for me. Who amongst you wouldn't have embedded a blunt stick into his spleen given the circumstances? I mean, are we not men? Do we not bleed? Sadly, by then, they'd called in the SWAT, and a team was fast at work breaking down the barricade I'd erected on the mezzanine, well out of my reach. I hopped up to get a good swing at him, and wouldn't you know it, picked off by a sniper. "I'll see you in hell, Samuel. I'll see you in hell."